Hello, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Corey. I'm the founder of beatingtrauma.com. And today we are going to talk a little bit about parenting and particularly why it is so hard to break our cycles that we're trying to break. I know a lot of you are not parents, so I'll start off by saying this applies to a lot of us regardless, because we're going to talk mostly about projection. And projection is something that we're all doing regardless of whether or not we're parents. So if you're not a parent and you're thinking, well, this doesn't apply to me, listen up anyway, because there probably will be some nuggets of information in here that apply to your other relationships as well. I'm focusing on parenting today for a couple of reasons. One is because that is a big part of what I do as a coach. I work with a lot of parents who have young children who really want to do things differently than what was done to them. But the other reason is I am having a parenting workshop on Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern, and I'd love for you to come. So I'll talk a little bit about the kinds of things we might discuss in that workshop here today, particularly the projection aspect of parenting, because it's a much bigger deal than we might be thinking it is. It's a huge deal, actually, the idea of projection. So talking about it can really help us to understand what we're dealing with as parents, because it isn't, and I talk to a lot of parents about this, it isn't about overpowering what's happening in our system. That is not going to work for us in the long term. That is not, like I like to say, that is not a sustainable approach. We can't pretend we aren't feeling how we feel forever. I'll say we might be able to do that for a little while, but we can't do it for good. Not to mention, our children are deeply and energetically connected to us. So if we are pretending that we're not feeling how we feel, they know something isn't right. They can feel that disconnect between our actions and the way that we feel. And it creates some confusion for them. And so the best thing we can do is look for an approach that isn't suppression. But the first thing we have to do is figure out why we're suppressing in the first place, which isn't always so easy to understand. So that's why we're going to talk about projection today, because truly the number one reason why changing our patterns is so difficult is the concept of projection. And again, as I said earlier, this applies to far more than just parenting relationships. I mean, this can be every relationship we have that will have issues around this. If you've got relationship issues, intimate relationship issues that you're struggling to work out because the patterns just seem to keep repeating themselves over and over again, projection is likely involved in that situation too. I think with parenting, it's sort of on like steroids, this particular thing. And that's because for most of us, our inner children and our external children are very deeply connected to each other. So that's why that is. So the short answer for why changing patterns in parenting is so difficult for us is projection. Now I'm going to explain to you what I mean by that, because we throw this word out a lot. If you look at sort of mainstream advice that's out there, the term projection can get used quite a bit. So I want to talk about, well, what does that even mean when we talk about it? So when we grew up in abusive homes, and I will also say that that can include homes that just don't embrace your most authentic self, okay? You may not be thinking this is trauma, but not when people don't embrace the authentic self of a child, that is traumatic. So I want to be really clear about that. We will internalize as children what is good behavior and what is bad behavior. Now, that good and bad behavior is being defined by our current role in that family, which is one of a pretty powerless child, but also for that particular environment. And we will begin to establish rules in our system for what is good and what is bad out in the rest of the world based on what we experience as a powerless child in the particular role we're in a particular family. Okay? That may not be reality. As a matter of fact, it very often isn't. Just the fact that a powerless child is going to have different rules for how to live in the world versus an adult, right? So that alone is a big difference. And believe me, there are plenty of families that push, the values of society in general. So many times we will find that those rules are also encouraged by the society we live in. But what happens is we internalize these rules as facts, and they sit in our unconscious thinking in that way. They become facts for us, things that we must live by. And I'm going to give you some examples of what I've seen both in my own life, but also with my clients, things that have been internalized on their part as good and bad. And I'm going to talk a little bit about those. And then, of course, we're going to talk about how this shows up and what we do about it. Some of the things that are pretty common in families is this idea of taking responsibility or over responsibility is good. Many times for kids, that means taking on activities and things that are well kind of outside of their current range of what they can handle. That is considered good. And this begins to develop that overproductivity of the controller in general. Taking care of others' emotions is good, right? So what we learn here is how to be really hypervigilant about emotions of others and make sure to address or adjust our particular behavior so that we are helping others out with their own emotions. And unfortunately, in abusive families, this can mean that others will use their emotions to get the child to do what we need them to do. I'm sad because you won't do that, or I'm going to get really angry if you don't do that. And so the child learns, okay, I need to figure out what's going on with this person's emotions and address those emotions by changing my behavior. So that's what we learn is that that's good, right? So that's another place where we learn, okay, taking care of other people's emotions is good, right? Doing what you are told is good. And I often hear people talk about this. I really want my child to be one of those adults who, challenges the, typical modus operandi of the world. I want them to go out there and be themselves and push back on control of others that is not okay. And I really want them to be that person that gets out there and changes the world. But then in reality, when they're still a child, we're like, just be good. Just do what you're told, right? Just do what you're told. And that goes against that whole philosophy of how we want them to be when they're older. I have certainly faced this myself. It's very, very hard to raise a child who thinks for themselves and does what they want to do instead of what they're always told to do. Because that means we have to give them that space to live that way when they're children. And that's super hard to do, especially when we're coming out of our own trauma. So doing what you're told is good. The next one, supporting the family is good. Now that can look like a whole lot of things, okay? It can also extend well into your adult life, like supporting your family even after you're an adult, staying very close to the family. There may be some monetary component of supporting the family. Certainly towing the family line, telling the family story, whatever that is, regardless of whether or not it's true. These are all very good things to do. You want to stay close to the family. And a lot of times that will even be sold to you as a child through the eyes of safety, right? It's good to have a tribe. You need to support this family because this family will support and protect you. Now, sometimes that's true, sometimes that's not, but that's sort of the message that the child hears. So supporting the family is good. So these are good things, right? Examples of what we're taught are good. Now, as adults, those may or may not be good, but in childhood they are, and those are some of the rules we may be developing. Now I'm going to give you some examples of what's bad, okay? Emotional expression will usually be labeled as bad unless it is a normalized emotional event, because we also don't want to appear like we're robots. If we're at a funeral, we need to have emotion, right? So there's a lot that goes into when it is acceptable to have emotion and when it isn't. But for the most part, emotional expression is a bad thing, and that is a rule that we learn, and it is a very difficult rule to unlearn. But for a lot of us, we are dealing with that. The next one is authentic expression of your purpose is bad. Now, again, this is not everyone, okay? But a lot of times when we have a particular talent, purpose, passion, desire for our lives, that will come with a lot of family resistance. Now, you may be thinking, why would they do that? Why would they be resistant to me being who I am like that? Well, a lot of times it's because the particular generational structure encourages a suppression of that particular purpose. I have found over and over again that people that have a certain purpose have usually found a significant amount of resistance to that very specific purpose in their childhoods. Could be because that purpose is inherited and our other adult family members when we are children have already suppressed it. So again, we're moving into that projection explanation a little bit, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute more. So they project that suppression onto you. I've heard the story so many times. Yeah, I was going to be a singer, but my mom really wanted to be a singer and she couldn't be a singer and she wasn't very encouraging of me being a singer. And sometimes she even acted a little jealous about me singing. So I just kind of learned to squelch that, dumb it down a bit because I didn't want to make her feel bad. That's what I'm talking about, right? So the expression of your purpose is bad. That's the rule that starts to set in. We don't want to upset those parents who never got to do their special thing, so I shouldn't do my special thing, right? The next one is telling the truth is often bad. Now, this is confusing because we definitely learn from our parents that we should tell the truth. But generally speaking, we should only tell the truth where it doesn't hurt the adults in our lives or doesn't make them look bad, right? Or affect their reputation, so to speak. So clearly I have parts that don't want me to talk about this today, but this concept of telling the truth is bad is usually meant for things that are going to negatively impact the adults. And it's very confusing for children, because then they're also told they need to tell the truth. But they also learn that, especially in highly punishing or punitive families, that telling the truth is dangerous, right? I don't want to get in trouble because it's not just going to be a little pleasant conversation and lessons learned. No, it's going to be some kind of rage or retaliative response. So telling the truth becomes bad in a lot of different ways. So these are some of the rules that we might set up as children in families that are traumatic or abusive in nature, and these get internalized. When we are on the path to recovery, like once we become adults and we start doing that insatiable reading of material to try to heal ourselves, which so many of us do, we start to learn that these rules aren't true. We learn that they're not a good idea. Our adult brain tells us that. But we have internalized this with those inner parts and in our unconscious. So even though our adult brain is reading the material and going, I know that telling the truth is good. I know that I want to express my purpose. I know that I want to feel my emotions. But something in there is going, no way are we going to do that. And that's because of the internalization of these rules from childhood. So what ends up happening is the inner parts that hold the bad behavior, which usually means the most self-expressive and authentic behavior, that is suppressed. So that gets labeled bad and it is suppressed. The inner parts that hold the good behavior, they become in charge of the suppression. So these are often the parts that do what other people tell them, that it's basically living life for other people. In a nutshell, those parts end up in charge, and they also end up in charge of the suppression itself of those bad parts. So these parts that hold the good behavior are parts I often refer to as inner defenders. So they're going to be your big suppressive parts for all the other stuff that's been labeled bad. So again, we're setting up to talk about parenting our children. Granted, what I've said to you today applies to everything and most relationships. But I would say that when parents come to me, they are so frustrated with not being able to change their patterns. And no matter how much they read, no matter how many cool ways of parenting they read. You know, a lot of people that I work with also follow Janet Lansbury very closely, and they love her work, and I love her work. And they're like, why can't I do what she says? And this is why. It's not because your adult brain doesn't know these things. It's because of what's been internalized and the suppression of self that then creates this suppression outside of self. So whatever you've been using to suppress the bad in you, which is not really bad, you then project that same suppression out onto your children when they exhibit the same behaviors, which they will, because children are here to express authentically. For those of you who have been parents, you know what I'm talking about. They express, right? But then what comes from us is the same thing we're telling ourselves. So we're telling ourselves, don't be so emotional, right? Stop crying. I mean, how many people, when I do like live workshops and I say, how many people heard stop crying? Even when not everybody in the room is like self-confessed trauma survivor, they probably are anyway, but they almost all say they heard that phrase when they were growing up. Stop crying is like the number one suppressive term I think that's out there when it comes to emotions. So don't be so emotional, right? That's the suppression. Another suppressive tool that often gets used is your goals are unrealistic. Now, I'm not saying it would be said that way, but it would be implied. And it can be implied in a lot of different ways. For example, oh, there's no money in that career, right? Or, oh, the world is a tough place and there's a lot of competition for that particular passion. I don't know if it's going to happen for you, right? Like the same things we're telling ourselves about the same passions, oftentimes, maybe not exactly the same, but similar. And then the last one that I wanted to bring up that's a potential suppression is focus on making others happy. We hear this all the time. Oh, just give your uncle a hug, even if you don't want to. It's just a nice thing to do. Or call your grandma and thank her for that thing that you never wanted because it's the nice thing to do, right? Just put up with that behavior that's probably abusive from that other adult because it's the nice thing to do, right? Never say no. No is mean. We want to be nice. We want to do the nice things, make other people happy. This same thing we're telling ourselves. Same exact thing, right? We're now telling them. So how is it that we stop these patterns, right? And also, I just want to say, feel free to tell me your own examples of where you feel like this suppression has happened for yourself internally and kind of moved out into other people. Yeah, it's about not making them feel bad, Amy's saying. Then it reminds them they are responsible. Yes, because if we are in charge of how somebody else feels, then we have to do whatever it takes to make them feel good. And it's funny because I'm always giving my kids the lecture that you can't make another person feel a certain way. Like that's up to them how they feel. Now, doesn't mean we're going to go be abusive to people because it's on them anyway. No, like that's taking it too far. But yes, like how they feel, like if somebody comes up to us and says, I feel this way and it's your fault I feel that way. That's when we need to start going, oh, okay, what's going on here? Right? Like, what's the deal? And so, yes, we have been taught, like, I am responsible for how my parents feel, right? That's why we get guilted into stuff with them. I am responsible for how my grandparents feel. I am responsible for how my siblings feel. Everything that I do has this major impact on the people around me. And don't get me wrong, if we're being really nasty people, we can make changes and that's okay. And I'm not talking about that, but I am saying that we are not responsible for whatever guilt is being placed on us to behave in a certain way. Like that's not ours. We can make a choice to follow our dreams. And if that makes people sad because they didn't follow theirs, I'm sorry, but that's not our responsibility. right? Yeah, and Amy's saying I have trouble being assertive because of this. It will absolutely impact our assertiveness. As a matter of fact, like I've actually had experiences where the word no gets stuck, like right here. I mean, obviously you guys who've followed me a while know that I can have throat issues sometimes. Words have literally been stuck there. Have not so much anymore, but before words would get stuck there and I would have a really, really hard time standing up and being assertive when there was something I needed out of this life. And it was very hard for me to ask for it. So we end up on this roller coaster of just do what they say, do what they say, do what they say, do what they say. And we never get a break from it to even explore what we want, right? So how do we change this, right? So I've been talking about the problem, but what do we do about it? Which of course is why we're all here, right? So first of all, we need to see these suppression attempts as projection. That's number one. Until we see the suppression as projected, we can't do much else about it. So we want to start watching for what are we discouraging? Whether it's in our kids or other people, other relationships we're in. What is it that we feel very adamant that we need to tell this person to protect them against themselves, basically, is what it means. What are those passionate spots for us where we just cannot stop telling somebody to not do that thing or to do something else or to look for those spots. They're there and we can feel really, really passionate about those too. It's like, oh, oh my God, I have to stop this person. I have to stop this person from doing the biggest mistake of their life. This is the worst thing ever, right? We want to look for those spots. Those are our projection spots. Because truly, in the end, what people do with their lives is what people do with their lives. It's actually not our concern. But boy, when we feel very, very passionate that they're making a big mistake, that's our cue. That's our that's telling us, go inside. There's something there in you that makes that very passionate for you. Because if a controller is suppressing a particular way of being in the world inside of you, they cannot allow it to be shown out there in the world, because what that does is that weakens the controller's suppression ability. Because now the controller is like, okay, my whole reason for telling you you can't do that thing is getting blown up in front of me because somebody else is doing it, right? That's important. So when we feel that passion around that person doing that thing, we need to let them know it's a mistake, it's a bad idea. That's our controller. And that's projection of our own internal suppression. So watching for that, figuring that out when you see it. The next thing is following our emotion to our own thread of experiences. When we feel that passion to tell somebody not to make that mistake, there is emotion tied to it. Okay. Now, in the case of our kids where we're trying to stop certain behaviors, we may feel anger. Rage may even come up. It could be other emotion too. We could feel futility, which is like powerlessness. Like, oh my gosh, like I'll never ever succeed. Like I'll never be able to get past this point in my life. I won't be able to keep my kid from doing this thing that I won't even let myself do. Like the futility can really come up pretty strongly. So really looking for what is your emotion saying to you and how can you follow that emotion? Because oftentimes we'll get into the head and we'll try to think our way through it. We'll be like, what is this about? I wonder what this is about. I wonder if there's something from my past here. And if we stay on that emotional, kind of let the emotion guide us and really work with that, we're going to connect quite naturally to what experiences are driving that. It may directly be our own childhood experiences of being suppressed, and many times it is. Now, we want to write from that language that suppresses. Excuse me with my throat today. We want to write from the language that suppresses. So what does the suppression say? We can start by writing it at the person, because that's very effective to kind of get us familiar with the language. But over time, we can start to see the ways in which we're saying that to ourselves as well. So the more we write, the more we get kind of exposed to that inner world and what's actually happening internally. So that's what I have for you today. This is a very effective group of steps to take when we are parenting and we're trying to stop cycles, but it is also extremely effective in all of our relationships, to see what are those trigger points? What is it I'm trying to suppress in them and therefore within myself? And how can I follow that emotion to understand why it seems to be so important to my defenders to suppress this thing, right? That's what we want to understand. So thank you all so much for being here. I am going to be having a parenting workshop this Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. I will also offer a recording of the parenting workshop after the fact. So if you can't make it, you will still get the recording. That will come out afterwards. It's only $25, 2 hours. So it is quite a great and kind of cost-effective way to get a lot of information. We are going to base most of our work, most of the writing we do from the inner parts on this concept of projection. So it takes this concept and works with it more. So if you found this interesting and you're like, oh yeah, this is going on in my life, this may be the workshop for you. I will leave the link to the workshop in the comment section of this live stream so that you can sign up. And I thank you all so much for joining me today. Thank you, Amy, for your comments. I appreciate you coming in and being active. So I look forward to talking to you guys next Tuesday. I will talk to you then. Thanks so much. Bye.